The moon hung low over the forest, its silver glow spilling through the trees like liquid light. Every leaf, every blade of grass shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and for a moment the world felt suspended, caught between night and something darker, something magnetic. She breathed it in, the crisp night air tingling her senses, and felt a pull she couldn't explain, a pull that made her heart drum a frantic rhythm she hadn't known existed. A rustle in the shadows drew her gaze. He emerged impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a fluidity that was almost predatory. The alpha, even from a distance his presence pressed against her like a tangible weight, the energy between them crackling with tension neither could ignore. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, measured, yet carrying an undercurrent of something that made her stomach twist. "I could say the same about you," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But even she could hear the tremor beneath her words. His gaze lingered, and for a moment the forest seemed to fall silent, holding its breath along with her. There was a recognition in his eyes, something ancient, unspoken, as if her very soul called to him. She had known pacts other than hers, rules other than hers. But this connection, it was forbidden, it was dangerous, it was everything. "You feel it too," he murmured, almost as if confessing a sin. She wanted to deny it, to step back into the safety of her pack's territory, to remind herself of loyalty and duty and the promises she had made. But every instinct, the one she had trained to trust, the one she had trained to ignore, screamed at her to move closer. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying the scent of him, the wild, raw essence of the alpha. It wrapped around her, pulling at her, anchoring her in a moment that would linger long after he was gone. She blinked, and he was already fading into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his presence and a heartbeat that was far too fast. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging within her. The moonlight caught her eyes, and for a fleeting second, she allowed herself to imagine what could be, what should never be, and yet, as the night deepened and the wind whispered secrets through the trees, she knew one undeniable truth: she would never be the same. Because the alpha had marked her, not with claws or fangs, but with something far more dangerous, the pull of a bond she could not resist, and the forest waited, holding its breath for the consequences that were already beginning. The morning sun pierced through the canopy, spilling golden light across the clearing, yet it felt hollow. She awoke on familiar ground, her pack's territory, but the warmth of the sun couldn't reach the chill curling in her chest. The forest still whispered of the night before, of the alpha's gaze and the magnetic pull she couldn't name. Around her, her pack moved with practiced ease, laughter and chatter filling the air, but she felt like an outsider even among her own. Every glance toward the distant ridge toward the alpha's territory drew her like a lodestone. She could almost feel his eyes searching for her, even though he had vanished hours ago. "Earth to you, Lyria," a voice called, sharp and teasing. It was Kale, her childhood friend and confidant, but even his familiar face failed to ground her. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. She knew he would have pressed, but Kale respected her silence. Sometimes, even as she tried to immerse herself in pack duty, training, tending to the wounded, reinforcing boundaries, her mind drifted. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl, reminded her of what she couldn't say aloud, the bond she had felt unbidden with the alpha. Whispers floated through the clearing, soft, cautious, curious. Some pack members had noticed the tension in her posture, the way her ears twitched when a wolf from the neighboring territory moved too close. "She's tied to him somehow," someone murmured, voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. She caught a fragment of it and her stomach clenched. Her heart had no choice but to recognize it, a bond beyond packs, beyond loyalty, something written in blood and moonlight. She had been trained to serve her pack, to obey its hierarchy, to resist temptation, but the pull toward the alpha defied every rule she had learned. A sudden howl pierced the morning calm, sharp and commanding. She froze, her ears strained. It was him. Even without seeing him, she felt the energy of his presence pressing against her. The bond stirred like wildfire, warming and dangerous all at once. She wanted to run, to retreat, but her legs refused to move. She swallowed hard, heart hammering against her ribs. Duty told her one thing, instinct told her another. And deep down, she knew she could no longer ignore that something. Someone out there was pulling her toward a path she was forbidden to tread. And somewhere in the distance, the Alpha watched, aware of her gaze, aware of the struggle she didn't yet understand. The clearing buzzed with activity as the two packs convened for the seasonal gathering. Wolves from both territories moved like shadows across the sun-dappled grass, their forms shifting between human and lupine with effortless grace. Lyria's heart thumped wildly in her chest, not from the excitement of the event, but from the presence she could feel before she even saw him. He appeared across the gathering, standing near the edge of the Alpha's circle, his posture commanding, his aura radiating power that seemed to bend the light around him. The Alpha's eyes found hers almost immediately, piercing through the crowd, and for a heartbeat, everything else. The chatter, the wind, the scent of moss and pine disappeared. She froze, cheeks warm, hands clenching at her sides. Every instinct screamed for her to look away, to avoid the pull, but she couldn't. His gaze held a weight she had never known, recognition, curiosity, and something softer, almost imperceptible, interest. "You're stirring trouble again, Lyria," a familiar voice whispered beside her. Cale's tone was teasing, but the warning in his eyes was real. You can't ignore him forever. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her attention was fixed, locked on the Alpha, who had somehow reached across distance and expectation to claim a space in her mind. Then he stepped closer. The subtle movement sent a shiver down her spine. "You don't belong here," he murmured, so low that only she could hear, and yet every word felt heavy with intent, as if it carried a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. I belong with my pack," she whispered, though her words felt like a lie. The pull between them tugged at her very soul, insistent and impossible to resist. The Alpha's lips curved in the slightest smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They remained intense, searching, unraveling the barriers she had spent her life constructing. "Perhaps," he said, "but some bonds are unbreakable, whether you will them or not." Her chest tightened. He wasn't speaking of loyalty, duty, or territory. He was speaking of her, of them, and the thought terrified her. As the ceremony progressed, every gesture, every glance he cast in her direction felt deliberate, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Every interaction with other wolves, the playful jabs, the cautious stares, was overshadowed by the silent dialogue happening across the space between them. By the time the gathering ended, Lyria felt both exhilarated and exhausted, as if the very air of the forest had conspired to draw her toward him. She knew one thing with clarity: the Alpha had seen her, truly seen her, and nothing would ever let her forget it. And deep down, a part of her wondered if she even wanted to. The evening air was heavy with the scent of pine and earth, but Lyria's mind was far from the serenity of the forest. She paced the edge of her pack's territory, the soft rustle of leaves beneath her boots the only sound that grounded her. Every instinct told her to remain vigilant, yet another, more insistent pull kept tugging her thoughts toward the Alpha. She hadn't yet processed the intensity of his gaze at the gathering, nor had she been able to shake the feeling that something about him, something about their connection, went beyond mere attraction, and tonight, whispers in the wind promised answers she wasn't sure she wanted. Cale approached quietly, his shadow stretching long across the forest floor. "Lyria," he said softly, "you've been avoiding everyone since the gathering. What is it? What's wrong?" She shook her head, unwilling to burden him with half-formed fears. "I'm fine," she lied, though her chest tightened at the falsehood. "It's nothing." But it was never nothing. The truth clawed at her from beneath the surface. Memories of her mother's hushed warnings, stories told in shadows, fragments of her lineage she had buried long ago. She was not like the others in her pack. She had been born of a line marked by blood ties that intertwined with powerful alphas, ties that could either protect her or destroy everything she held dear. A rustle in the brush made her heart leap. From the shadows, an elder of her pack emerged, eyes sharp and knowing. "Lyria," he said, voice low, "it's time you knew the truth about your bloodline, about what makes you different." Her stomach twisted. Different how? She asked, though part of her already knew. The bonds you feel, the pull you resist, they are not ordinary, he said, glancing toward the direction of the neighboring Alpha's territory. Your lineage carries a connection to him, a connection older than your pack's founding. The moment you met, the threads of fate tightened around you both. Lyria's breath hitched. She had sensed it, the invisible pull, the uncanny recognition in his eyes. But hearing it named aloud made her chest ache. Her loyalty, her pride, her carefully constructed life, all hung by the thinnest of threads. Some would see it as a gift, the elder continued, voice heavy with warning, others as a curse. You must decide how far you are willing to let it control you. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, toward the ridge where she had glimpsed the Alpha's shadow moments before. Every instinct screamed both desire and fear, warning and promise entwined in the same invisible thread. She felt her heartbeat sync with the rhythm of the forest, with the pull of something far larger than herself. And somewhere out there, across pack lines and whispered warnings, the Alpha was waiting, unaware of the storm of destiny already brewing around them both. The clearing was packed with members from both packs, their murmurs buzzing like a swarm of restless insects. Lyria's heart pounded in her chest, her stomach twisting as she stepped forward, summoned to the ceremonial ground for the seasonal alliance ritual. She had trained for this every move, every gesture, but tonight, under the piercing gaze of rival packs, she felt exposed in ways she could never have anticipated. And then she saw him, the Alpha. His presence at the edge of the gathering radiated power, calm control, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Every instinct she had, the pull, the bond, the unspoken recognition, flared like fire across her veins, but before she could even think to approach him, a rival stepped forward, tall and ruthless. Seems your little wolf has wandered too far. He sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. Perhaps she thinks she belongs somewhere she doesn't. Lyria's blood froze. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Members of her pack shifted uneasily, uncertain how to respond, and the Alpha. He watched silent, his expression unreadable. You'll have to prove your worth. The rival continued, forcing her into the center of the clearing. The crowd's eyes pressed down on her like a physical weight. Lyria's throat went dry. She tried to steady herself, tried to summon courage, but every step felt like wading through quicks. And is this acceptable? A voice called from her pack's side, sharp with warning. But the words were drowned by murmurs and the rival's mocking laughter. The Alpha's gaze never left her, and for a moment it felt as though he could pierce the humiliation surrounding her, see through it, and pull her into safety. Yet he didn't move, not yet. Her cheeks burned, heart hammering in her chest. Every instinct told her to run, to disappear into the forest, to escape the cruel eyes of both packs. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a stubborn ember of defiance sparked. She would not bow completely. Not here, not to him, not to anyone. The crowd leaned in, expecting her to falter. The rival's grin widened, and just as the tension reached a breaking point, a low, controlled growl rumbled across the clearing, deep, resonant, and impossible to ignore. The Alpha was speaking, but not a word, just the weight of presence, the threat in silence, and the unspoken promise that he had not forgotten her. Lyria's chest burned with a mixture of fear and longing. She wanted to turn to him, to reach for the protection she felt in his invisible grasp, but she couldn't. Pride, fear, and duty pinned her in place. And as the rival's grin faltered, the murmur of the crowd rising like a tide, she realized one undeniable truth. Her bond with the Alpha was no longer something she could ignore. The forest was quiet, almost unnervingly so, as Lyria moved along the narrow path leading away from the ceremonial grounds. Her chest still burned from the humiliation, every step heavy with the weight of stairs she would never forget. She tried to steady herself, telling herself it didn't matter, that her pack, her duties, her pride were enough. But the memory of his gaze, unwavering and intense, refused to leave her mind. Lyria. The voice was low, familiar, carrying across the quiet like a brush of heat against her skin. She froze, her pulse spiking, He stepped out from behind the trees, the shadows clinging to him like a cloak, his presence overwhelming and irresistible. "You shouldn't have stayed to endure that," he said, voice calm yet edged with something she couldn't name. Concern, possessiveness, desire, it all twisted in her chest like a storm. I had no choice. She whispered, her hands clenching at her sides. It was my pack's duty, my responsibility. He stepped closer, the air between them charged with tension. "No, that was my concern, not theirs, not yours." His eyes locked onto hers, deep, dark, and unyielding. "You don't belong in that kind of danger, not if I can prevent it." Her heart hammered, and she could barely meet his gaze. "You can't protect me from everything," she said softly, though the words lacked conviction. "You're wrong," he murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible growl threading through his words. "Some bonds." He hesitated, his eyes flicking to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Some bonds are unbreakable, and ours is one of them." Lyria's breath caught. She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't ready, that she wouldn't allow herself to be claimed. But every nerve, every heartbeat screamed the opposite. The invisible thread that connected them tugged at her relentlessly, impossible to resist. "I don't understand," she admitted, voice trembling. "I can feel it, but I don't know what it means." He stepped even closer, close enough that the warmth of his body brushed hers. "It means you can't deny it. You can try, but the pull is already there. You feel it, I feel it, and neither of us can ignore it any longer." Her fingers itched to reach for him, to close the space that still dared to keep them apart. But fear and pride held her frozen. Yet in the quiet of the forest, under the watchful gaze of the moon just beginning to rise, she realized the truth. She was bound to him, not by pack, not by duty, not by choice, but by something deeper, older, and far more dangerous. And as their eyes locked once more, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which would break first, her pride, or the pull of the bond they could no longer deny. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke from the neighboring pack's territory. Lyria's steps were silent as she moved through the forest, but she sensed it before she saw it. The presence of someone who shouldn't be here, someone dangerous. "Thought you could hide from me," a smooth, mocking voice called from the shadows. She spun, heart hammering, to find a tall figure stepping out from behind the trees, eyes glinting with cunning and malice. Darius, a rival from the neighboring pack, infamous for manipulation and deceit, and someone who had long coveted both power and her attention. "I don't belong to you," Lyria said, trying to steady her voice, though her hands trembled slightly. "Yet here you are," he murmured, stepping closer, his grin sharp and predatory. "So easy to find, and yet so untouchable. The Alpha doesn't see it, but I do. He thinks he can claim you, but he doesn't know what you truly are, or what you can do." Lyria's pulse quickened. The undercurrent of threat in his words was unmistakable, but so was the lure. Darius had a way of testing boundaries, of pressing just enough to provoke fear, anger, and curiosity all at once. "I'm nothing to you," she said firmly, though a part of her heart betrayed her with every word. "Ah, but you are everything to me," he replied, voice low and dangerous, "and I will see that you're mine, whether you want it or not." Before she could respond, a presence materialized behind her, a shift in the air, subtle yet commanding. The Alpha, his eyes, glowing faintly under the moonlight, locked onto hers for a fleeting second before turning toward the rival. "Step away," he said, calm but lethal. Every word vibrated with authority, with the promise of consequences that could not be ignored. "Or you'll regret it." Darius laughed softly, circling them like a predator assessing prey. "Oh, Alpha, always so protective. But even you can't control what's already mine to claim." The tension in the clearing became almost physical. Lyria felt the bond inside her pulse in response to the Alpha's presence. Powerful, unrelenting, protective, the invisible thread between them thrummed like a live wire. And as the rival's smirk widened and the forest seemed to darken around them, Lyria realized that her world had grown far more dangerous than she had ever imagined, not just because of packs or politics, but because Darius knew something about her that even she didn't fully understand. The moon hung high and heavy, its silver light spilling across the forest like liquid fire. Lyria's breaths came fast, her chest tightening as a strange, uncontrollable energy surged through her veins. She hadn't felt it before, not like this. Her vision blurred at the edges, shadows twisting unnaturally around the trees, and a low, guttural growl escaped her throat before she could stop it. She stumbled, clutching her head, the power inside her pulsing like a living thing, demanding release. Panic gripped her. This wasn't just a bond with the Alpha anymore. This was something older, darker, something tied to the bloodline her elders had whispered about in fear. Lyria, the Alpha's voice cut through the forest like a blade. He was at her side in a heartbeat, his hand on her shoulder grounding her even as the energy tried to pull her into chaos. Focus, listen to me, I can't control it, she gasped, trembling as sparks of raw power crackled along her skin. Every step she took seemed to shake the earth beneath her, and distant trees bent as if sensing her turmoil. He took her face in his hands, eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You are stronger than you know. Let me in. Trust me." The words ignited something deep inside her, a desperate surrender to the bond she had fought against for weeks. Her hands reached for him almost instinctively, grounding herself in the solid weight of his presence. The world seemed to hold its breath, and then it happened. The surge of power slammed into her fully, knocking her off her feet. Shadows and light collided around her in a chaotic dance. She screamed, a sound that was part fear, part exhilaration, part recognition of the power she had never dared to embrace. The Alpha caught her effortlessly, holding her close as the energy spiraled outward. "You're safe," he murmured, his breath hot against her ear. "I've got you, always." For a moment, she let herself believe it, let herself feel the pulse of the bond, the unbreakable tether that connected them in a way that defied reason. The fear and shame, the confusion, they all melted under the weight of his protection. But even as calm began to return, Lyria sensed it, the whispering shadow within her bloodline, the hint of something dangerous still lurking just beneath the surface. She had tapped into something ancient tonight, something that could either save them or destroy everything she held dear. Her gaze met his, and in that moment, both knew. The bond was not just emotional. It was a force neither could deny, a power that could bind or shatter them, and the night had only just begun to reveal its secrets. The clearing was alive with tension, the air thick with anticipation as members of both packs gathered under the pale light of the rising moon. Lyria's chest tightened with a mix of fear and determination. Every eye seemed to burn into her, some curious, some judging, others openly hostile. And there, standing at the edge of the gathering, was the Alpha, immense, unyielding, and every inch the ruler of his territory. "Enough," he said, his voice low, resonant, carrying across the clearing with a force that silenced murmurs instantly. Wolves shifted, ears pricked, but none dared interrupt. All eyes turned toward Lyria, and she felt the invisible thread of their bond vibrate through her very bones. "This ends tonight," he continued, stepping forward. Each footfall was deliberate, unshakable, drawing her attention like a magnet. "She belongs to no pack but herself, but she belongs to me." A gasp ran through the crowd. The rival pack members stiffened, faces pale with disbelief. Darius, standing across the clearing, froze, his expression flickering between fury and disbelief. He had thought he could manipulate, intimidate, or claim her, but the Alpha's declaration shattered every plan. Lyria's heart raced, mind spinning. She wanted to resist, to protest, to assert her independence. But the bond, fierce and undeniable, pulled her toward him. Every fiber of her being longed for the protection, the claim, the acceptance he offered. "You claim me?" she whispered, voice trembling, in front of them all. "Yes," he said, the strength in his voice unwavering. "In front of the world, I claim you. No one else will dictate your fate." The wind stirred, carrying the Alpha's scent and the raw energy of his presence across the clearing. Lyria felt herself sway, drawn into his orbit, the invisible thread binding them taut and electric. Her fear and pride battled with the pull, but slowly, inevitably, she let herself lean into it. Darius snarled, stepping forward, but the Alpha's eyes, dark and commanding, froze him in place. "Do not test me," he warned, the power behind his voice leaving no room for argument. The rival pack retreated, whispers of fear and awe trailing behind them. Lyria's gaze met the alpha's, and in that instant all pretenses, all resistance fell away. There was no denying it anymore. The bond between them was real, unbreakable, and stronger than fear or pride. As the crowd dispersed, murmuring and exchanging glances, Lyria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was his, in every sense that mattered, and he had claimed her not with force, but with the undeniable gravity of destiny. And as they stood alone in the moonlit clearing, the bond thrumming between them, she realized that nothing, not rival packs, not curses, not fear, could ever pull them apart again. The forest was calm, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The lingering shadows of night receded, leaving only the golden light that filtered through the leaves. Lyria breathed deeply, the tension of the past days slowly easing from her shoulders, though her heart still raced at the memory of the alpha's claim the night before. Beside her he stood, immense, unwavering, every inch the alpha who had captured her body and soul. The bond between them thrummed beneath her skin, steady and undeniable, a pulse that mirrored her own heartbeat. She glanced up at him, a soft smile tugging at her lips, and found him already watching her, eyes bright with the weight of love and unspoken promises. "You're finally letting yourself rest," he murmured, his voice warm, low, and filled with a tenderness that contrasted with his fierce presence. I'm still afraid," she admitted, her fingers brushing against his hand, feeling the strength and warmth that anchored her, afraid of losing myself, afraid of what's coming next. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "There is no losing yourself, Lyria, not when you are mine, and I am yours, our bond. It protects us, it guides us, we face what comes together." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the mingled scents of forest and pack, freedom and belonging. Lyria felt it, the culmination of everything, the attraction, the pull, the forbidden tension, the trials, the danger, the fear, and beneath it all, the unshakable truth. She was exactly where she belonged. "Do you really mean that?" she asked softly. Her voice wavered with a mix of hope and vulnerability, the final walls she had held around her heart beginning to crumble. He smiled, that rare, genuine curve of his lips that lit up even the forest shadows. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he replied. "Nothing. No rival, no curse, no past can change what we are. You are mine as I am yours, destiny unbound." A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of relief and exhilaration. She stepped closer, her body almost melting into his, and felt the invisible thread that had pulled them together all these weeks solidify into something tangible, unbreakable. Behind them, the rival packs had retreated, whispers of awe following them. The political tensions, the manipulations, the power struggles, they no longer mattered. The world beyond this clearing was secondary to the bond that now defined her. The alpha wrapped his arms around her, strong, protective, yet gentle. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, matching it with her own. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to let go entirely, to surrender to the pull, to the love, to the destiny that had always been hers. The forest seemed to exhale with them, the trees swaying in silent celebration. The moon's last silver threads faded as the sun rose, bathing the clearing in warmth. Lyria felt whole, unafraid, unbound from the chains of past fears. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's presence, she knew without question, no force, no curse, no pack rivalry could ever sever what they shared. Their bond was eternal, their love unbreakable, their destiny, finally, fully unbound.